Hi everyone, this is Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It's a part of a mini series that's just going to cover very high level basics of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was just recently passed. My name is Karle, and I'm with Karle Law LLC. Hey, I just wanted to let you know that this is for informational purposes only, and that this mini series number 1 is going to cover some dates to be aware of with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the new tax rates that were set into place, the new standard deductions, and the removal of exemptions. Like, what are these exemptions? Hi, so this first slide we're going to talk about the dates that you need to be aware of. First one is that this was signed into law December 22nd, 2017. And so when you're doing your research or looking at an article, just make sure it's not citing just the Senate bill or the House bills that were passed before that date. Make sure you're talking about the correct Tax Cuts and Jobs Act bill. Then for this current tax year that we're filing for, which is we're in the season for 2017, those are due in April of 2018. That tax year is generally not impacted by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, except for that on Schedule A for the medical limitation, it's reduced for everyone to 7.5%. Other dates to be aware of is that for individuals, it generally begins for tax years beginning after December 31st, 2017 and before January 1st, 2026. That's essentially the years of 2018 to 2025. That's the same thing for the changes for pass-through entities. And then for C Corps, it's essentially begins after December 31st, 2017, and then those changes don't expire. Note that for all of these dates, that could change if Congress decides to change those dates, especially for the individuals and pass-through entities. When we get close to 2026, it could be that Congress decides to make those permanent, but we just don't know. At this point in time, they do run out. All right, the next item up on this mini series is talking about the new tax rates that apply. For 2017, you can see that we had our original 7 tax rates for the individual taxpayers, and they ranged from 10% to 39.6%. And then now the Act temporarily replaces these existing tax rates with 7 new tax rates, and they range from 10% to 37%. You'll notice that many of the tax rates do go down. You'll see that, for example, the 15 is essentially now a 12%, 25 is essentially now a 22%, and so on and so forth. So we have 28 reducing to 24, 33 to 32, and then you roughly have the 35 staying the same, then the top rate decreases as well. So when we're looking at the old tax rate charts, something else to note is, so here are the tax rates that I was just discussing. They ranged from 10% to 39%, but here is when they apply. So you'll notice here on the side here, so this is for married individuals filing jointly. You'll notice that the 15% tax rate starts at $18,650, and for example, the top one, 39.6, starts at $470,700. You'll notice that the new tax rates down here, remember all these rates went down, but not only did the rates go down, when they apply goes up. So you'll see that here before it was the 18,000 range, now we're at 19,000 range. Down here, this was a pretty big jump. We were at 470,000 about, and now we're at 600,000. So what that means is that the effective tax rate applies at a higher income level. So basically everyone's tax rates, the tax amount that you should be paying in should be lessened. Well, it's good news. So next in the mini series, we're talking about the standard deduction. This is what you would take if you're not going to itemize your deductions. Many people don't really itemize their deductions until they own a home, and that's because you get the mortgage interest rate deductions and property tax deductions that you wouldn't normally get if you were renting your home. So a lot of people who don't own a home will generally take a standard deduction. That's not for everyone, but that's just a general rule. So in this year, you're gonna see for this year's filing season, so the ones taxes that you file in April, you'll see that individuals were basically at 6,350, married filing joint was at 12,700, and that heads of households are at 9,350. And then the new standard deduction starting in 2018 will be 12,000 for individuals, 24,000 for married filing joint, and 18,000 for heads of households. So essentially it's doubling. So that's great about the standard deduction. Something else to note is that the additional standard deductions that you normally would claim are unchanged. So for the blind or elderly. So in this slide, I'm going to talk about exemptions. Basically, this is what they took away. They almost doubled the standard deductions, but they did take away exemptions. And you can see here on your page 1 of your 1040, you might recognize that this is where you mark whether or not you're single, married filing jointly, or heads of household, etc. up here in this filing status section. So if you had a married filing joint, you would say here, you'd mark this. And then you would have yourself under your exemptions here, your spouse. And then let's say you had 3 children. And they were all minors. And they lived with you all year. So then you'd have 2 here. You'd have 3 here for children. And then you'd have a total of 5 exemptions. Now let's pretend that the interestingly, they earned an exact 100,000. That was their adjusted gross income for the year. They decided they were not going to be itemizing. They took the standard deduction, so that's where you get what we talked about the first time. And then here's where your exemption comes into play. This line 42. This is page 2 of your 1040, line 42. This married couple with 3 minor children, they earn less than 155,650 a year. You can see they earned up here 100,000. They're taking a total of 5 exemptions that we talked about before. That's one for the taxpayer, one for the spouse, and one for each of the minor children, or basically each of the dependents. That for the year, you multiply this by the exemption amount here, and you get a total of 20,250, which then goes again on this line here. So they started with 100,000. Then we took the standard deduction that gave them brought their income down to 87,400. Then we took another 20,250 based on the exemptions because they had 3 children, bringing their total income, taxable income, to the 67,150. So essentially, between the standard deduction and the exemption, they had reduced their income by over 32,000. All of that exemption talk is going away, which can be more people could probably wrap their heads around. It makes it simpler. So beginning this year, 2018, it's now simpler. The family would just take the standard deduction of 24,000. In this minimum scenario that we're talking about here, and we haven't gotten to the tax child credit, but the taxable income would increase. In this example, the family would see a taxable income increase, but just because their taxable income increase does not necessarily mean that their taxes will increase, but the tax base of taxable income is increasing in this example because the standard deduction is less than what they would have gotten previously. All right, so that's it for this mini series number 1. We're just talking about the removal of the exemption and the standard deduction and some of those rates that we talked about, how they were basically all over for the tax rates. In mini-series number 2, we're going to talk about that changes to Schedule A, the very important child tax credit that would help this family out that we just talked about, and the new additional credit for dependents that you can have. We'll also bring in some other important updates. Just again, this note, these materials are for informational purposes only. I hope to see you back again in mini-series number 2.